A Richie McCaw movie star. It's got a good ring to it, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's not really what I ever imagined you'd even put those words together, but yeah, I don't know about star. It was a movie made, I suppose, is the way I'd look at it.
You must be thrilled with it. It's a fantastic watch.
Yeah, look, all the feedback's been pretty positive in New Zealand since it's been out. Look, I guess the reasons I made it was to show a little bit about what I'd done, and for me to say what it's all about is sort of more for others to say whether they enjoyed it, and it's been nice to have some positive feedback.
There is. It did cross my mind more than once when I was watching it that there is a certain reluctance when you sit down and face the camera. That's the only time where you look like you're not in your comfort zone, let's say. And for somebody who has transcended greatness, never mind chased it within the sport, that's still not particularly your kind of comfortable space, is it?
Well, not really, I don't think. I think the sort of psyche in New Zealand, especially around the rugby, is you don't blow your own trumpet, you sort of stay quite humble, and and I think that's the way it comes across. When we've done all the interviews over the past, you don't want to give the opposition a bit of motivation or anything by overstating where you're at. So it's always been a little bit like that. But this was going to be once I finished playing, and I wanted to, if you're going to do it properly, you had to give a little bit of an insight as to really what you felt and how you saw things. And yeah, it wasn't that easy because it wasn't sort of natural. But I know the director had to sort of keep pulling things out. But I think when I look back on it, the stuff I did sort of share, really happy I did.
And it was really relevant stuff, I think, and it really gave us an understanding of you and your progression and how much work and how hard it is to become great. It's not something that people are necessarily born with. You obviously had a talent, but you had to work.
There's no doubt, and that's one of the things I wanted to show, is that you don't just turn up on a Saturday because you got given some talent and play and it's all easy. There's a lot of talented rugby players and talented rugby teams, and I guess I want to show an insight as to how much effort and energy goes into being able to perform when it really counts, on the big stage and all that sort of stuff, and show that I got a huge thrill out of doing it. But there was a lot of time and energy and effort and all those sort of things went into being able to do that, and show that perhaps perception sometimes of rugby players, you're perhaps just all brawn and just fly into things.
Well, you made sure the brains were shown, because we saw how clever you were at school, which was something I was really pleased my 11-year-old son saw, that you actually worked really hard at school as well.
Yeah, I guess that was part of telling the story that you don't have to. Well, you don't have to forego those sort of things to be able to be successful on the sports field. I think it actually marries up pretty well if you're prepared to, work hard at those sort of things. You get good habits, all those sort of things that are pretty important.
And you said something there about the culture as well in New Zealand, and not being flashy and not giving too much away. And is that really integral to being an All Black?
I think the humbleness of the Kiwis, especially in rugby teams, is what's kind of expected. It's always been the way. That's sort of the way All Blacks, when I was growing up, you looked at them, that they were sort of, there's always that talk about, men of the land, that sort of thing, understated, and just go out and get into it. And I think that's what suits the New Zealand psyche, and that's what we enjoyed. I think sometimes you perhaps don't celebrate what we do as well as we could, but it's a fine line between getting carried away with where you're at to keeping your feet on the ground. And as I say, I think that's what suited the way we did things, and it suited the background I had, I think, and you just let your actions do the talking.
But to keep that kind of ethos and to keep those kind of values in this modern world, with all the kinds of attention and kind of grabbing and head-turning things that can happen to sportsmen and women, it's really incredible that 15 men and a squad much bigger than that can keep that kind of focus and not have one person that thinks they're bigger than the rest.
I think that the big thing that was important to help that is that what the All Blacks stand for is bigger than an individual. And you saw it, the guys that moved on after 2015, it doesn't take long to be forgotten about, and the next lot in there doing the job. And I think that's what's special, because the All Blacks succeeding is the most important thing. I think sometimes in other sports, the one person star can be bigger than the team or the game or whatever themselves. Whereas in rugby in New Zealand especially, you don't have that, and that's the history of what the All Blacks is all about. When you come into it, you got to buy into that, and hopefully that doesn't change. It wouldn't take much to start eroding that, but I know it was driven by the senior players and the coaches to make sure that was still a pretty important part.
Which again explains your reticence in a way, I guess, to be the person that is held up in such high esteem. But when those moments came, those moments where it was the last time you were going to play Test rugby in New Zealand, or you knew these were your final moments, if you like, of achievement, you did have a different demeanour. It did look like you were able to just take all that in and absorb that appreciation.
Yeah, and I think if there's one thing I look back is it was always going on to the next thing. You didn't actually stop and appreciate what the team had done and what you'd done, and that's what keeps you, I guess, as I say, feet on the ground and not getting carried away. But I sort of knew in that last year, and I didn't close the door completely, but I sort of deep down knew all the way along, and I wanted to enjoy it, but I also wanted to not sort of crawl to the end. I wanted to be there so that I was playing just like I had done when I was younger, and when you're able to do that, you're right. It wasn't sadness that this is going to be the last time. It was actually joy that you got a chance to do that, and I think it's a pretty slight difference, but it actually changes your sort of outlook on what you were doing.
And there was a moment as well where you could get a sense of the intensity that was within you at that point, where Dan Carter said that he was beginning not to recognise his mate because you were so consumed with this final goal.
Yeah, and I think he was probably perhaps meaning from the 2007 to the 2011. There's no doubt that, and I think I mentioned, and I didn't really understand it till after we'd won in 2011, how single-minded and focused I was. But I think we were all a little bit like that. We'd been a team that had done pretty well, but we hadn't won the World Cup, and there was always that, no matter where you went, what you did, it was always there. And until we sort of got that monkey off the back, you become pretty focused and single-minded. So he's probably exaggerated there a little bit, but I sort of, he's probably right in a way that, we weren't going to let much get in our way.
So Six Nations is upon us, and England, of course, went the whole of last year as an unbeaten Test side, and will go into this tournament as the team to beat. Where do you, when you watch the Six Nations, and do you watch the Six Nations first of all? I'm guessing you do.
Yeah. No, I absolutely keep an eye on it. It's quite intriguing. I actually think, leading to this one, has actually got more intrigue than perhaps some before, but for a couple of reasons. One, I actually thought the autumn tours up here, there's very, very little between any of the teams, and you saw Australia and South Africa getting beaten, and even the All Blacks getting beaten in Chicago. So it's added a whole lot of spice to wondering where everyone sits. And then obviously England been successful over the last 12 months. Naturally there's going to be a fair bit of talk about that. So I'm actually really intrigued as to how it's going to play out.
Did you not pay as much attention to the Six Nations when you were playing because you were absorbed in your own career, or does it feel a bit more interesting now that you're no longer playing Test rugby? It's
a little bit different. I wouldn't have sat and watched games as such when we're playing, because we're in the middle of Super Rugby. You sort of keep a bit of an eye on it, but you knew that come the time you play the teams you're playing, you'd have a damn good look at those games. So you looked at it from a different point of view, whereas I think I'm just a bit more spectator now. So you watch and you think, oh, that's interesting, and you sort of watch from a fan's point of view. And like anyone now, you're sort of going, well, this is what everyone's wondering or thinking. It'd be interesting if there's going to be upsets, or whether it's all going to go to what everyone thinks. And I think that's what's intriguing about it. And because of those victories over those Southern Hemisphere sides in the autumn, does it appear to you that the gap, it's a perennial question, isn't it? Is the gap getting closer? I don't think the gap's been, you might sort of make a case, there's been, the results have sort of gone the way of the Southern Hemisphere for a wee while, but even those games, there's not much between, it doesn't take much to swing it, and I think there's been a little bit of, what you saw with the results in the autumn, it's that gap, or that perceived gap is not there. And look, it's going to be the same within the Six Nations. You say, well, England are the favourites to win, but they're going to have some pretty tough matches when you look at the Irish and even the French. I thought they were quite impressive, the game I watched against the All Blacks in the autumn, so it won't take much to swing around again. Yeah.
Do you think because there are coaches from the Southern Hemisphere now at the helm at so many of the Northern Hemisphere sides, it's changed the style of rugby?
It probably has a little bit. I think I just look at the teams, just coming in with an idea of I'm going to play this way without actually seeing the players you've got. I think you've got to be a bit careful about just having a philosophy and not adapting around the players you've got. But there's probably a little bit of a case for it. But you look at the English team, you compare back to, say, the World Cup year, still a lot of the players are very similar, and you wouldn't say that they've gone and changed a whole lot. Sometimes just confidence and a bit of a different, slightly different philosophy, as you say, might have been the difference to change it. But I wouldn't look at them and say it's a whole lot different to what they were doing. So I don't know. But perhaps just someone give them a bit of confidence to do something that you were trying to do, but do it a slightly different way can make a big difference. And that's why, just a change of voice can be the difference sometimes, and that's perhaps what you're seeing with Eddie Jones coming in. But yeah, look, I don't know. I look at the Irish, like with the Southern Hemisphere coach and Joe Smith, but their strengths have been the same strengths for a while, but they really got confidence in what they're doing.
He's made them a lot more disciplined as well.
Very disciplined, but they are very, very good at areas like the contact and stuff like that, which they have been for a while. I think back to when we played in 2013, that's their strength, and they really, they get that right. They're pretty big handful.
So what kind of a marker do you think it put down, that victory over the All Blacks in Chicago?
Well, I think it showed it doesn't take much to swing in your favour. They've been close a couple of times in the previous games, but I think they showed that both teams feel pressure. Just because they may not have won for a while or at all, it doesn't take much just to get across the line. And I think they were pretty close to being able to. Well, they were with pretty good stuff in the second test too. So I think everyone sort of stood and seen that. It doesn't take much to swing that. And
what do you think psychologically, having been there in those situations, for Ireland, that will do in terms of their confidence in the Six Nations?
Well, I don't know. It'll be interesting. Like I know when I've been in situations where you might get out of a tight one or whatever, the next time you get there, you sort of have belief that there's a way of finding a way. I don't know. I was actually sitting watching the Chicago game with quite a few Irish folk, including Brian O'Driscoll. It wasn't Brian, but the Irish folk. It was when the All Blacks got back from 4 points. There was the hands when it's happening again. That's a bit of the psyche. And if the players feel any of that sort of stuff, where no, it's happening again, then you're going to change how you play that last few minutes. Whereas, the fact that they've got across the line, those thoughts may not come into their head at all if they had done them previous.
And so, with obviously England having gone a whole year unbeaten as a Test team, and they'll go potentially they could go another year, but having 2 years not playing New Zealand, which is what people are kind of saying. Well, can you test their greatness? Can you see how good they are if they don't come up against the All Blacks? What do you think?
Well, it'd be nice to have been able to see them play each other, wouldn't it? Just from a fan's point of view. But all it's going to do is keep making the next game they do play with a fair bit behind it, isn't it? They've done extremely well just from the England point of view. To play a team 4 times and win 4 in a row, that's not easy. When you to get that motivation, that deep motivation that you need to win. When you get to the 4th one, where do you go and do the preparation exactly right? That's where you got to take your hat off to them that they're able to do that. But
so you were impressed by that summer tour in Australia?
Absolutely, yeah. It's not easy at the end of a season to play a team 3 times in a row and win 3 times in a row. But it would have been great to have seen the All Blacks at the end of this year, say, play England, but we'll have to wait.
For you, that would have been the big matchup in last year?
Well, I think so, yeah, especially Six Nations champs versus, the Rugby Championship champions. that's what you want to see, isn't it?
Yeah, it did feel like the fixture that was kind of crying out to be played, didn't it, at the end of the season?
Yeah. Oh, well, we'll just have to wait.
What do you make of the comments Eddie Jones has come out with, that there aren't enough world-class players in the Six Nations?
Well, I think that's. I think he's using that as a bit of motivation to. I don't know why he's saying it, to be honest.
To the other teams, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure. I think there's no doubt there was plenty of world-class players. I think I saw that quote too, where he talked about consistency is what he was. I think that's sort of what he was meaning, is doing it every single week, and that's. I guess that's where you start. And I talk to players about it. Like good players, and you say, well, when you're playing well, is it just because you played well one week and you had an off week the next week? Actually, the top players you talk about may not be a whole lot better, but they just turn up every single week. And I think that's sort of what he was meaning, that to be a top class player and team, you've got to do it every single week. And I think he's pretty well spot on in terms of that's what my meaning my understanding of what a world class player is, someone that at their ability every single week, or they don't fluctuate much. So he's probably right in terms, and that's obviously what he's aiming for with England, is that they're not just happy with what happened last year, that they go and do it again. And
so being world class is judged over a long period of time.
I think so. I think that's there's talented people who can go out and pull out a performance that's you say wow, but if they don't do it the next week or the week after. The old story or the old quote, you're only as good as your last game. I think that's quite true when you start talking about it. But you think about any top sports people around the world, people like Federer's, even when Tiger Woods was playing, it was every single week that they were in with a sniff. They may not have won every week, but they're right there. And that's what I consider and I think that's what Eddie was sort of meaning.
And you obviously know a lot about Ireland from their victory over the All Blacks in the autumn. They're up against the Scotland side with another Kiwi at the helm in Vern Cotter, who is facing his last Six Nations. He'll be moving on, so clearly has a point to prove, you'd think, there as well. And they come off the back of a very successful season last time. Yeah,
the Scots are, they've been close on some really big matches, I think against Aussie, and you think back to the World Cup quarter against Aussie as well. It's not going to take much. I was talking earlier about, Ireland getting across the line and getting that, probably it'll help their belief going forward. Well, I think the Scots are a little bit in that situation, where I just I've seen a couple of times Greg Laidlaw, the captain, he's almost a broken man. How do we get across the line? But it's only going to take it's not going to take them doing a whole lot different. It's just one or two things at the end of games that just go their way, and it might be a bit of luck, I don't know, that all of a sudden they start believing, that we aren't far behind any of these teams.
And it's interesting that a lot of people are putting their Lions test team out in the last few weeks, who they should watch out for in the Six Nations, and there are quite a few Scotland faces and names getting into people's 15.
Well, I think so, and as we talked a bit before about the consistent performance. Say the Scots start being right up there, the players will have to be like that, and they'll start putting their hand up. You got big fella Gray, you got Laidlaw, you've got
Stuart Hogg.
Yep. So you got quite a few names that you straight away say they're going to be in the mix, which perhaps the Scots haven't been like that in years gone by.
Do you have any insight into where you think any surprises could come, or who you think the team might be to watch out outside of England?
Well, the Irish, I think, and there's been talk, they're going to be right in with the sniff, and I think the last rounds is England-Ireland, so that could be a decider. That'd be a hell of a match if that was, but I don't think you're right off the French, to be honest. I know they've got a couple of injuries with, guys like Fofana, who, is a big part of their team, but, when I saw the game against the All Blacks, I actually thought they were more confident in what they were doing perhaps to previous for a while. So
you haven't mentioned Wales?
No, I haven't mentioned Wales. To be honest, I haven't seen a lot of Wales.
But just interesting, because obviously Warren Gatland has got his mind on the Lions, and Wales have Rob Howley at the helm, and it's always difficult, that kind of season where he's got to focus on Lions business. So it kind of brings us nicely round to the Lions, I guess. And
well, it's going to bring out the best in players, and they're playing for a spot as well. That's going to be quite interesting. I think, I know in New Zealand, there was a bit of a reality check that, if ever, and perhaps more from a fan's point of view rather than the team, that the All Blacks aren't as far ahead or got things as sorted as everyone was sort of making out. It's, it's going to be a hell of a series. and you just look at the quality of the players, that if they get the right players together and mould it together, it's going to be a hell of a series, I think.
For obviously players here to be part of a British and Irish Lions tour is a huge thing. Are they All Blacks as excited? Do they get as kind of stoked up at the idea of the Lions coming down?
Absolutely. I know in 2005 when we played, it was huge. And you know, in your career you only get one chance at it probably. So
yeah, because of course for you guys it's once every 12 years.
Yeah,
not once
exactly.
Every 4 years.
And you know, the hype and everything that comes with a Lions tour it blew me away. You know, 12 years ago. So all the guys are pretty excited by it. And they realise, you know, you get one chance, and if you blow it, you don't get another go at it.
Tell us what it would be like for those Lions going down to New Zealand, because obviously it's such a small country with so much passion for rugby. It'd be a very different experience to Australia 4 years ago.
Yeah, I think so. I think for the guys that perhaps, you know, it's similar to what the World Cup was like in 2011, you know, where everywhere you go around the country, there'll be an interest in talking about it, or, you know, someone will have an opinion. You know, perhaps in Australia, for example, it's just mainly in Sydney, really, where rugby, and maybe a little bit more to a lesser degree in Brisbane, but certainly New Zealand, everywhere you go. But it won't be it won't be easy for the Lions. You know, the games against the franchises, it's going to be a massive. Was it about 6 weeks there? Yeah, it's not going to be easy.
Those midweek games are no walkovers, are they, in New Zealand?
No, not at all. And the test matches are one thing, but I just think of the guys that'll play for, say, the Crusaders, the young fellas that are, you know, Super Rugby players, get a chance to play against the Lions. Like, what a thrill for them, and imagine that's going to bring out the best of them. And they're all pretty good rugby players too, so it's not as though you come up against sort of the part-timers or anything. These are full professional guys who are, you know, get their one chance. So
desperate to make a name for themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And that's going to make it interesting in itself and make it tough. So
will you go and watch those games?
Yep, I'm sure I'll get along to especially the Christchurch one against Crusaders, and I'll say I'll get along. Well, hopefully get along to the test matches.
Can we talk a little bit about the new directives on high tackles? And it has been definitely the talking point this season. First of all, have you seen the new directives in action, and what have you made of them?
To be honest, I haven't followed it too closely, but I do understand a little bit about, you know, it's probably more so the punishment for those sort of tackles that are around the head. Look, I just think from my point of view, I never tackled like that, or I never sort of got myself in positions, and I don't think it's necessary to be having arms swinging around sort of the head or accidentally. So, you know, to use that as an excuse, oh, that's just the way we tackle, and now you're eliminating that, I'm not sure that's quite right. But at the end of the day, you want people to play and not have high risk of getting hurt and wax the head. You know.
So do you think is there an argument as well that the way players are being coached to tackle it needs to have a
I don't know whether it's been coached to
well?
tackle. I think you know, you see some people that more often than not, they're the ones that, you know, we have it in the teams I've been in, you know, they're always borderline that they're erring on the side where it doesn't take much to be off, and they do go high, whereas some guys never do. Now you can say, oh, that's just the physical nature. They need to be tackling in that way to impose themselves, maybe. But
if the punishments are more severe, which is the outcome of the
you're going to have to adjust, and they want to make it safer. But I don't think it'll take the physicality out of rugby or anything. But if it saves people getting hurt, then that's what we want.
A fair few concussions and knocks to the head, presumably something that you would like to see less of for players.
Well, there was players that you kept an eye out because they were always, you know, you just wanted to keep an eye where they were, because could easily, they get it wrong, hit you pretty bad. So look, I don't know. As I say, I'll be careful what I say because I'm not totally up to speed with it. But if it's going to mean it's safer out in the field for people playing, well, that's not a bad thing. And I don't think it's going to change the nature of what rugby's all about.
One of the interesting stories that was followed in the film was how the Australian press were treating you, and you know what kind of names they were calling you ahead of the second the return fixture, wasn't it, of the Bledisloe Cup? How do you deal with that mentally? What's your psyche like when you're being called a cheat and they're calling you out like that?
Well, I sort of early on when that sort of stuff started happening, I think you can look at it two ways. You can get annoyed by it and say that's not really nice and all that stuff. But I just saw it as a compliment, to be fair, that I was doing something to irritate the opposition, and it must mean I was doing something right.
Do you think they were trying to influence the referee in any way, or put extra pressure on the referee to watch out for you?
Oh, could be a little bit. I'm not sure. I think it was, you know, it became quite an easy thing to talk about. You know, when it came to talking about Australia New Zealand matches. You know, when you're the captain, and you know, if you're having an influence, it's an easy way to have a dig back. I don't know. But as I say, it really never affected me too much, except I just used to enjoy if there was some frustration because you're doing something good.
Who do you look out now in world rugby, the players that you enjoy watching, and the players who are in the Six Nations who you enjoyed playing against?
I guess some of the guys, you know, that I played against, you know, you look at it slightly different when you're not going to be competing against them, and perhaps, I don't know, appreciate more what they do. Like I know I had some pretty good battles against Sean O'Brien, the Irish, and I probably didn't sit and appreciate, you know, what a good player he is, because I always think, geez, I'm going to have a tough match when I play him next. Whereas actually now you sit and can appreciate, you know, the sort of things he can do.
Did you enjoy going toe to toe with somebody like that, though?
Oh, it was great leading up, because you knew you had to be right on your game. And to be fair, you know, a lot of the players you play against were like that. It's not as though you'd go in there and think, oh, this guy's going to be easy, but there's some that, and George Smith was another when I was playing. You know, you enjoyed those sort of challenges because you knew you had to be on your game. But in terms of, I think you start to appreciate opposition from a fan's point of view, some of the things they can do, rather than thinking about how we're going to stop that. You know, as I mentioned, Wesley Fofana, and I actually really rate him pretty highly, and you know, I think the French in the autumn, you know, really started to show what they could do, and you sort of appreciate that rather than thinking, how are we going to stop that guy? You know, it's a little bit different way of looking at it.
Yeah, and what about in England? Who did you admire out of the England team from that summer series that you might have had your eye closer on?
I think a guy like Owen Farrell, you know, he's played a little bit of 10 and 12, but there's no doubt when he sort of gets ball he wants, he can have a massive influence. And I think the guys around him, you know, I know, you know, like halfbacks and that, they have a guy like that that's able to have influence. You know, he lifts guys around them, and you can sort of, I think, see those sort of things. Whereas, you know, you stop a guy getting ball like that, you know, it changes how they play. But when they do, and I think that's what the English did pretty well.
And when you were playing against Northern Hemisphere sides, how much did you know about the individual players, or was it more about your execution?
Yeah, look, I think you get to know guys as you played them more. So the guys have been around a while. I think the newer players, you know, would look probably more, you know, leading up to a game, and I guess you look at how you're going to stop a unit or something like that. So, but from a forward's point of view, there's no doubt you got to know guys pretty well. Like, you know, you'd study lineouts and then breakdowns and stuff. So the guys you're coming up against, you'd have a fairly good idea. But the thing I didn't do was, you know, watch games intensely until sort of the week before we were playing, and that's when you'd start to figure out who you were really playing against, and you have the memory from last time if you played them as to who had an influence and who annoyed you and all those sort of things. So, well, there's no doubt you sort of, you do have there's a difference between watching what you see on TV and the feel that you had last time and playing them. Like, it can be a little bit different to what you see, but you know that they can, you know,
influence the game
things.
massively.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing I always either feel or wanted to when you're playing and pose. It was the influence you could have rather than the flashy stuff you'd do or things that were seen. You just sort of knew the guys that had presence.
What was the one stat, though, that you were always keen to check for yourself and your own stats at the end of a game? Tackle count?
Yeah, probably not so much just numbers of tackles. It was the impact of the tackles. So yeah, we'd get all that rated, you know, about whether you created turnovers or whatever from your tackles. So yeah, that was the one I looked at, and misses. Didn't want to miss any. That was one that used to annoy me.
So on stats or on feeling, what was your greatest game, do you think?
There's probably, I don't know, I've sort of tried to answer this a few times, and for different reasons. Games like 2008, we played in South Africa at Newlands, and we won, I think it was 19-0. And like, if I looked at that game now, you'd sort of go, oh yeah, that looked okay, it looked pretty good. But I knew deep down, you know, you had a massive sort of influence over several things. They're actually quite hard to see, but I walked off the field really feeling good. 2005 second Lions test felt like that. That was the day that DC played out of this world, really. But I knew, I came off that field thinking, how I really played well today. But I know I've seen it later, and you go, oh, it didn't look like I did that much.
The 2008, the Newlands match, I wonder if that was partly also because after that disappointing 2007, was it a moment where you thought, I know what to do now, I know how to get this team?
A little bit of that, and you sort of like, you either sort of, you had to go, right, if I'm going to be captain, you're going to do it properly, and you're going to go out and play well. Yeah, those sort of things. And I think that was sort of, we'd had a bit of a rough start. We'd lost a couple of games in a row, which caused a bit of grief, you know, in terms of, you know, have we got things sorted? And but that was a match that I don't know, it always pops up in my mind when I get asked that question, because I sort of, I love that challenge of playing in South Africa, and that was one of the days that, you know, I walked off pretty damn happy.
And that was 2008.
Yeah.
So they didn't include 2 World Cup finals. I love it.
Yeah. I guess, yeah.
They were okay those days.
Well, I guess one I am pretty proud of, and look, it wasn't the absolute best best game ever played, but the World Cup final here in 2015, it was I felt I played pretty well, you know. So to leave your last game in a performance that you sort of go, well, that was, you know, right up there with one of your good ones, you can be pretty happy with that.
You looked quite still in the dressing room afterwards. You looked very composed, and I know you were all singing at one point, but it felt like you were just, there was almost, I crossed the line, relief. I got there, I made it.
Yeah, it was a different feeling to 4 years previous, where that was just pure relief, thinking, you know, had we not won, probably wouldn't have got another crack. But so I just wanted that to end, and was happy that it had, thank goodness. Whereas 2015, I actually didn't want the game to end. Like, it was fun, you know. I know it got a bit tight there for a while, but it was actually fun being out there on that stage. And I guess deep down I knew that was my last game too. And as soon as that final whistle went, there was I'd say probably about a minute where I was like, oh, this is it, and then I was like, well, I can either, you know, be sad about that, or just go, wow, this is awesome, I want to enjoy it. And that's what I tried to do, and I absolutely loved, you know, that next few hours, whatever it was, you know, where we got to enjoy it. And I'm so glad I had that attitude, rather than, it would have been easy to go, walk around and go, oh, this is it, you know. It was like, you know, it was, I looked at it a little bit different than that. And
then real life started to take over, and New Zealand's had its own royal wedding just a month ago. Once the rugby was sorted out, you could focus on your personal life.
Yeah.
And you're now a happily married man. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's pretty exciting, and I was actually probably more nervous for a wedding than I was for a test match. But no, it's pretty cool. And I've got to say, there's things I missed about rugby, but there's a lot of things that I'm excited about. You know, people say, do you miss it? Well, I miss some parts of it, but you close that chapter, you move on to the next one, and excited about the opportunities that you've got ahead of you. And, you know, getting married was, I guess, something that was, you know, look forward to, and it was pretty cool.
And now, obviously, you mentioned the future and what you're going to do. Do you have any plans to stay involved in the game from a coaching capacity? Because you clearly are a massive student of the game in terms of the way you analysed your own game.
Yeah, well, at the moment, I'm not sure coaching. I've got no desires to be a professional coach or anything like that. One of the reasons for that is probably it's not the initial thing I would want to do, and I wouldn't want to do it just because I sort of fall into it and I could do. You'd have to really want to do it. So I'm not sure whether that would be the case, but I would like to. I reckon that the type of coaching I'd like to do is either it's probably around the schoolboy level. I reckon that'd be really intriguing, where you can offer some help and see kids, because they just soak things up.
You'd find it too difficult to get yourself an under-12 rugby team, Richie McCaw. I think people would be clamouring for that.
Yeah, but I think there's got to be something I do in time. Like I actually really enjoying not having when I say the tie of rugby, but the commitment of rugby. I've got other things that I really wanted to get into and not be, feel like I hadn't left that behind as such. But I can see it changing pretty quickly at some point where you want to be involved again.
In the documentary, in the film, your wife, who wasn't your wife at that point, says that one of the greatest things about you is that you're so ordinary.
She's copped a bit of stick about that one.
I think she meant it as a compliment,
yeah,
didn't she?
Oh, she said that.
But she obviously sees the real you and sees that you're not superhuman and don't walk around with a cape on. I think that felt to me like what she was trying to say.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's one thing I tried to show in the movie, is that I didn't have to come from any special background or have anything that was different as such to anyone else. That you perhaps have some talent that not everyone has, but you've got to work pretty hard at chasing what you want to chase. And the great thing in New Zealand is that we have guys that play for the All Blacks that come from all backgrounds, and there's no one sort of there's not one thing you have to do to be an All Black. You could come from anywhere, and as an All Black in New Zealand, you live pretty normally, which is a great thing. You get a little bit of attention when you go places, but by and large you live a pretty normal life, and people leave you alone by and large, which is pretty cool.
So you were chasing greatness. Did you find it?
I don't know, that's for other people to think. One thing
But can you concede it to yourself? Can you admit to yourself that you got there?
I think deep down, the thing I'd admit to myself is, have I got any regrets about what I wanted to set out to do? And I sit here pretty happy that I did everything I could. Other people judge, where you sit on the scale of things. I think I sit there going, well, there's not much more I could have done. There's no regret sitting there going, oh, I should have done this, or perhaps I didn't put the time I needed into these things. I sit here going, I did everything I could. There's still things that at the end of your career I still think I could have been better at. And if you had more time, you would work on those things. But I guess that's just part of who you are. But I'm pretty happy.
You must have had plenty of offers with lots of money kind of dangled in front of you to come and play in the Northern Hemisphere, particularly in France for a year at the end of your career. How serious did you consider those offers?
I never really considered it at all. And there's probably a couple of reasons for that. One, playing rugby just to earn a check, to me, it would change the whole outlook on why I played the game. So that I didn't want that to be the motivating factor. Secondly, if I was going to put the effort into playing, and if I was going to play, you put the effort in, then I'd want to play in New Zealand, because that's what I love doing. There was a place I wanted to play. So I sort of go, well, neither of those things, so why would I come up to now? Is it to change the lifestyle? Some people say it's nice to come and experience something different, and that's true, and maybe that could have been a bit of a carrot, but I had opportunities to get into flying helicopters. I had a great network at home. I sort of felt like I'd done the thing in rugby. Gemma, my wife, was playing in the Olympics last year, so that was another factor that she wanted to be in New Zealand to do that, and I wanted to be able to support that. So for all those reasons, it was just never really crossed my mind, and I'm pleased, because the network of people I've got, you lose all that if you're left, and then a couple of years' time you're in the same situation, thinking about what to do next, whereas I had a bit of an idea that was going to work, and yeah, so far it's been pretty good.
Thank you, and good luck with the premiere. Have
Thank
you
you.
Have you chosen your outfit?
Just normal old suit. Yeah. So
Enjoy it.
no, thank you.
Thank you very much.
No,
Thank you.
pleasure.